Hello and welcome to the Yak, the Yards After Catch podcast, talking about wide receiver analysis. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Josh Shepardson at BChad50. Running down some of your top plays here, some value plays as well. Starting at the top, the expected return. It's not official yet, but we all expect Ben Roethlisberger to be back for the Steelers this week. So that means Antonio Brown, especially at his depressed price tag, coming off of his first, good game in about a month. Probably because he actually had a quarterback under center and not a track star. But either way, Antonio Brown at his price point this week, even if for some reason we do see Landry Jones instead of Ben Roethlisberger, he still has a nice high floor. You just got to love his upside if Ben is back in this one. And Antonio Brown, still one of the best receivers in all of football. And it's scary to think what he can do this week if Ben Roethlisberger's back, because we know this is going to be a big game for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, last year all the guy did was lead the league in receiving yards and receptions with Big Ben under center, and came out firing at an even higher level this year. Through the first three games, he went 9-133 and 9-195 and 1, and 11-108 with Big Ben under center. So that's 3 games of absolutely torching secondaries. You can't expect him to immediately jump in and do that again because Big Ben will have some rust take off, but I don't see any reason why you can't expect him to get targeted 10 to 12 times if Big Ben's under center. Reel in even half of those, and you're talking about a guy who's going to be flirting with 100 yards, probably going to find the end zone. And at his price points, I mean, under 8,000 still on DraftKings, you got to love it. But as you noted, I mean, if Big Ben doesn't play, I'm fine with using him with Landry Jones. Landry Jones is actually willing to throw a forward pass, which is remarkable for Brown's value. Michael Vick, not so much. And so I do like the matchup. Football Outsiders ranks the Bengals just 29th defending number 1 receivers. And, I mean, there's no question. Yes, Martavis Bryant's good, but Antonio Brown's the number 1 there. So I feel pretty good about using Brown this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the other side of this game, like you mentioned, you love the AFC North battle, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm excited for this game. So I may as well just get myself big pieces of it because this is where my eyes are going to be glued. And A.J. Green, as we know, shown up big time in big games, especially against division rivals. And if there's ever a spot for Andy Dalton to finally cement himself as a legitimate top-tier quarterback this season, it's to finally play well against the Steelers in Pittsburgh, which is something that he has rarely, if ever, done. So a lot of that's going to come with A.J. Green. Bengals have a lot of weapons, but you got to imagine if you want consistency in this game, and it does turn into the shootout that it can and likely will be, and I know you and I expect it to be, then Dalton's going to be looking for his favorite receiver down the field. And Steelers don't really have any one cornerback that has a good shot at covering him one-on-one in this matchup.
No, and Pro Football Focus projects Antoine Blake to cover him, and Blake is awful in coverage. I mean, his coverage grade is awful. He's got no shot against Green if he's gonna end up playing the majority of the snaps guarding Green. So one thing I didn't mention with Antonio Brown, because I decided I'd go ahead and save it for the A.J. Green discussion, is you have to love the Vegas total here. And you have to love the spread. I mean, this isn't a game where game flow should get out of hand for either team, or either player's going to lose out to their back, salting a lead away. Looks like this is going to be a back and forth game, at least in the eyes of the odds makers, and a high scoring back and forth game. So give me both number 1 receivers, both draw weak coverage assignments, and both have quarterbacks that play at an elite level. We've seen Big Ben do it in past seasons. Obviously, he's got to shake off some rust. We see Andy Dalton doing it this year. So I can't find a factor that's not working in favor of either of these receivers this week.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense there. And then value plays, and he's starting to creep up in price tag. Still a value play for, especially with his recent production. Stephon Diggs for the Vikings. Neither one has quite priced him like a number 1 receiver, as you pointed out, and especially on DraftKings, where he's still just sitting at $4,800. And you mentioned among qualified receivers, 108 receiving yards per games, and he's doing well. He's getting looked at a lot down the field, and finally Teddy Bridgewater has someone he can trust down the field. Kind of thought that guy would be Mike Wallace, really hasn't been, but Diggs. I mean, that catch last week, if you haven't seen that touchdown catch. That was catch of the week. I mean, that ball was way overthrown, and Diggs just closed on it and dove. Great catch there.
He looks remarkable. I mean, as a rookie, he's not supposed to be able to make it look this easy. And one little wrinkle that I loved in last week's game is that offensive coordinator North Turner got the ball in his hands with a carry as well. So, I mean, they're going to get him the football. He's getting force-fed the ball. And as long as AP's there to continue to draw the attention of the defense, it's going to help other talented players like Stephon Diggs, who has clearly emerged as the number one there. And anytime you get a number one receiver with talent at under 7,000 on FanDuel, under 5,000 on DraftKings, you pretty much have to hop all over that. The volume's been there, the production's been there with the volume. Diggs is doing everything you look for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and still at a pretty fair price, especially on DraftKings, like we said.
Yeah.
A guy that was on a lot of winning rosters last week from the Houston Texans. For once, it was not DeAndre Hopkins, who's been on just about every $1 million winning team this season until this past week. Nate Washington had a huge game, got himself a garbage time touchdown, kind of helped bail out Brian Hoyer's day as well. Now with Arian Foster out of the picture, certainly we've seen this situation before. Everyone says, Arian Foster's out. Who do I use in the Houston offense at running back? The answer for me is nobody. I'm just going to load up more on the wide receivers because I don't trust Alfred Blue. I don't trust Chris Polk. Neither guy a particularly good runner. So, I mean, these are the Matt Asiatas of the world over here.
Yeah,
these are the guys you don't want to mess with. So, Nate Washington, great value, and this is going to be a volume passing attack moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, even with some playing time with Arian Foster, Washington was getting targets. He's played 4 games from start to finish and was targeted double-digit times in 2 of those contests. He's been targeted a ton, and he has 2 100-yard receiving games with it in his 4 healthy games. Yet he's priced like a fourth receiver, essentially. I mean, he's 5,400 on FanDuel. He's not much more than the min salary for receivers, which is 3,000, priced at 3,600 on DraftKings. And even if DeAndre Hopkins gets his normal dozen targets, that's still going to leave plenty of targets on the table for Washington. I think you're going to see them air it out more to compensate for the loss of Arian Foster, so I'm not worried about the possible return of Cecil Shorts III. Washington's still going to get targeted probably between 6 and 10 times, and if he turns one of those into a long reception, he pays his $3,600 salary off at DraftKings, and if he catches a few balls, then it's really gravy time at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely take advantage of this discount here while you can. Next up, GPP plays. I'm sure you've heard of this man here, Julio Jones. Very expensive, $9,200 on both sites, but this is a situation against a Tampa Bay defense that he's got a great individual matchup there against a below-average receiver, and we've even seen Julio Jones at less than 100%. I mean, kind of fell on a touchdown 2 weeks ago, literally. Yeah. But the guy still produces, and when he's 100% healthy, I mean, it's hard to argue with him being the top, if not one of the top wideouts in all of football. And we know Matt Ryan trusts him. He had a touchdown last week, nearly had a second one. I thought it was a touchdown, but I guess that's why I'm not a referee. But either way, no one knows what a touchdown is anymore, but we do know that Julio Jones scores a lot of them.
Yeah, and I was very close to ranking him as an elite receiving play, but I opted to go for the other two because of the spread in their games. The Falcons are 7.5-point favorites, so it is possible that they race out to a big lead, and if Jones doesn't partake in the scoring early, there is some risk that they just go ground and pound with Devontae Freeman, Pac-Man the clock, and all of a sudden Julio Jones has a very difficult time paying off a $9,200 price tag on both sides. But as far as upside goes, his upside is unmatched. He's facing a team that Football Outsiders ranks dead last covering number one receivers, and there aren't many number one receivers that get more targets than Julio Jones, really just DeAndre Hopkins. So, I mean, the volume's going to be there, the matchup is going to be there, the quarterback play should be there. The only concern is that this game gets out of hand and it doesn't involve Jones blowing this game wide open, but I think more likely than not, Jones plays a big hand in the Falcons covering their 7.5-point spread and racing out to a big lead. So I love Julio Jones and GPPs this week.
Yeah, I'm a big fan there as well. And then another guy who's been kind of a mainstay on top tournament lineups this year, Keenan Allen, due to volume alone a lot of times, hasn't even found the end zone that many times really, but especially with Antonio Gates, his status up in the air, but it kind of looks like he's on the wrong side of questionable.
Yep.
And we saw Ladarius Green did get the couple 2-point conversions, but only 4 catches last week. So it's these short passes that Phillip Rivers lives for. And Keenan Allen give you short passes. He can catch the ball down the field. And, I mean, the guy can do it all. And when he needs a guy to make a play, it's Keenan Allen or it's Danny Woodhead. And you got to imagine that Keenan Allen is going to see the volume here.
Yeah, I mean, and the matchup is perfect. The Ravens are terrible defending the pass. They're the second worst team in terms of defending receivers from a fantasy perspective, according to Pro Football Reference. So the matchup is dreamy. The total for this game is the highest on the week. And the Chargers, only 3-point underdog, so this isn't a game that should get out of hand. Granted, it doesn't matter what the game situation is this year. They're throwing the football. They have no intention of running the football. No quarterbacks attempting more passes than Phillip Rivers. So it almost doesn't matter if Gates is healthy or not because they're going to air it out so much. Allen's going to get a huge chunk of the pie. So if Gates is out, all the better for Allen's upside and the targets that he should receive. But even if Gates is in there, even if the full complement of receivers is there for Rivers, Allen's still going to probably be targeted around double-digit times because that's what they do. They air the ball out. I don't ever recall seeing an offense that throws the football this much. And I haven't looked it up, but I'd be curious to know if Phillip Rivers is on pace to set the attempts record. I believe Drew Brees holds that record from a few years ago with the Saints, but they are just passing the ball so much.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit with him. And we even saw after a terrible first half last week, I mean, actually a pretty bad 3 quarters. He still managed to pay it off. So you can always count on him to be airing the ball out. And this defense is not good enough for them to really be far ahead of anyone, if you ask me, anytime soon. So definitely always going to need to be scoring points. Next up, the guy who his price just will not rise, Steve Smith Jr., Senior. The guy, one of the toughest wide receivers in the league, had a broken back or something of that nature, apparently. A few weeks ago. Now he's back. Didn't have a great game this past week, but still a solid game considering his price tag. And I mean, if we're talking about mid-range guys, there's not a single one who has a higher ceiling than Steve Smith, especially in this matchup against the Chargers secondary that, I mean, it's, I don't know how to say it without saying words I'm not allowed to say, but they suck.
Yeah, I mean, and again, let's look at that over-under total. Let's belabor the point. 50 is the highest over-under total for a game on the week, and it's only a 3-point spread. So, I mean, this game has shootout written all over it. Steve Smith is a target machine. It is the Steve Smith show in the passing game with Joe Flacco. He doesn't have alternatives to turn to. It is Steve Smith or bust in the passing game. So, the Chargers haven't allowed a ton of fantasy points to wide receivers this year, but it's not going to matter. Steve Smith is going to be targeted probably upwards of 10 times, maybe more. He's reached double-digit targets on 3 occasions this year, so he's going to get targeted a ton. And he's been targeted a minimum of 7 times in all 6 games this year. There are many receivers that can boast that steady volume that Smith can. And as a big play threat, all he needs is one of those to deliver, and you're talking about a long touchdown grab. So give this guy volume, and you're looking at a really high ceiling, as always, with Steve Smith. And the price point just does not line up with the production.
Yeah, once again, I mean, he's a guy that I've been kind of locking into my cash games for a few weeks, and this tonight really is no different. Or not tonight, I guess, but I guess if you're starting with Thursday slate, you can. But this week, really no difference. So I'm a big fan of his this week once again. And then next up, Martavis Bryant, last guy here. We kind of have already touched on this game. Big-time upside. We've seen Roethlisberger have huge games against the Bengals. He kind of loses a little bit of appeal if Landry Jones ends up starting. But like we said, we expect Ben to start. We aren't really sure. But Bryant's a huge receiver. I mean, he's a tough cover for anybody, especially with Ben Roethlisberger, who's just so accurate and so efficient down the field.
Yeah, I mean, he is a matchup nightmare. He's 6'4", 211 pounds. He runs like a gazelle. He's probably going to draw some Drake Kirkpatrick and not Pac-Man Jones, which is favorable for him. Kirkpatrick not as good in coverage as Pac-Man Jones is. And, I mean, you want to talk about a nose for the end zone. All the guy's done is catch 11 touchdowns in 12 NFL career games. I mean, that's ridiculous. Averaging almost a touchdown per game, and he's averaging over 20 yards per reception. The guy is efficient, about as efficient as they get. And, again, RIP premium stats at PFF for just us regular folk, but he was a guy that ranked in the top 5 last year in yards per route run, and that basically speaks to his efficiency. And I mean, it's more of the same this year. It's exactly what we saw last year. He hasn't skipped a beat. the suspension, the 1 game missed due to injury, has not slowed him down a bit. So I do like him. I like the matchup. Really like his price point at DraftKings, but I do think that there is value in that price point creeping up over 7,000 on FanDuel if it suppresses his ownership just a bit. And I think it will bring it down just a touch this week.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. So hopefully helped you out, get some good ideas of some wide receivers to target. Follow us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of other great content for NFL. And in case you didn't notice, NBA season is here. So make sure you're getting on board with that as well. And we'll see you next time.